expected to see and remember from a UFO sighting, and a statistical study of UFO reports. The end product of the study of the powers of observation of a UFO observer would be an interrogation form. Ever since the Air Force had been in the UFO business, attempts had been made to construct a form that a person who had seen a UFO could fill out. Many types had been tried, but all of them had major disadvantages. Project Bear, working with the psychology department of a university, would study all of the previous questionnaires, along with actual UFO reports, and try to come up with as near a perfect interrogation form as possible. The idea was to make the form simple and yet extract as much and as accurate data as possible from the observer. The second study that Project Bear would undertake would be a statistical study of all UFO reports. Since 1947, the Air Force had collected about 650 reports. But if our plan to encourage UFO reports worked out the way we expected, this number could increase tenfold. To handle this volume of reports, Project Bear said that they would set up a complete UFO file on IBM punch cards. Then, if we wanted any bit of information from the files, it would be a matter of punching a few buttons on an IBM card sorting machine, and the files would be sorted electronically in a few seconds. Approximately 100 items pertaining to a UFO report would be put on each card. These items included everything from the time the UFO was seen to its position in the sky and the observer's personality. The items punched on the cards would correspond to the items on the questionnaires that Project Bear was going to develop. Besides giving us a rapid method of sorting data, this IBM file would give us a modus operandi file. Our MO file would be similar to the MO files used by police departments to file the methods of operations of a criminal. Thus, when we received a report, we could put the characteristics of the reported UFO on an IBM punch card, put it into the IBM machine, and compare it with the characteristics of other sightings that had known solutions. The answer might be that out of the 100 items on the card, 95 were identical to previous UFO reports that ducks were flying over a city at night reflecting the city's lights. On the way home from the meeting, Colonel Kirkland and I were both well satisfied with the assistance we believed Project Bear could give to Project Grudge. In a few days, I again left ATIC, this time for Air Defense Command Headquarters in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I wanted to find out how willing ADC was to help us and what they could do. When I arrived, I got a thorough briefing on the operations of ADC and the promise that they would do anything they could to help solve the UFO riddle. All of this cooperation was something I hadn't expected. I'd been warned by the people who had worked on Project Sign and the old Project Grudge that everybody hated the word UFO. I'd have to fight for everything I asked for. But once again, they were wrong. The scientists who visited ATIC, General Stamford, Project Bear, and now Air Defense Command couldn't have been more cooperative. I was becoming aware that there was much wider concern about UFO reports than I'd ever realized before. While I traveled around the United States getting the project set up, UFO reports continued to come in, and all of them were good. One series of reports was especially good, and they came from a group of people who had had a great deal of experience watching things in the sky. The people who launched the big skyhook balloons for General Mills Incorporated. The reports of what the General Mills people had seen while they were tracking their balloons covered a period of over a year. They had just sent them in because they had heard that Project Grudge was being reorganized and was taking a different view on UFO reports. They, like so many other reliable observers, had been disgusted with the previous Air Force attitude toward UFO reports, and they had refused to send in any reports. I decided that these people might be a good source of information, and I wanted to get further details on their reports, so I got orders to go to Minneapolis. A scientist from Project Bear went with me. We arrived on January 14, 1952, in the middle of a cold wave and a blizzard. The Aeronautical Division of General Mills, Incorporated, of Wheaties and Betty Crocker fame, had launched and tracked every skyhook balloon that had been launched prior to mid-1952. They knew what their balloons looked like under all lighting conditions, and they also knew meteorology, aerodynamics, astronomy. I talked to these people for the better part of a full day, and every time I tried to infer that there might be some natural explanation for the UFOs, I just about found myself in a fresh snowdrift. What made these people so sure that UFOs existed? In the first place, they had seen many of them. One man told me that one tracking crew had seen so many that the sight of a UFO no longer even especially interested them, and the things that they saw couldn't be explained. For example, on January 16, 1951, 2 people from General Mills and 4 people from Artesia, New Mexico, were watching a skyhook balloon from the Artesia airport. They had been watching the balloon off and on for about an hour when one of the groups saw 2 tiny specks on the horizon off to the northwest. He pointed them out to the others because 2 airplanes were expected into the airport, and he thought that these might be the airplanes. But as they watched, the 2 specks began to move in fast, and within a few seconds, the observers could see that the airplanes were actually 2 round, dull white objects flying in close formation. The 2 objects continued to come in and headed straight toward the balloon. When they reached the balloon, they circled it once and flew off to the northwest, where they disappeared over the horizon. As the 2 UFOs circled the balloon, they tipped on edge, and the observers saw that they were disc-shaped. When the 2 UFOs were near the balloon, the observers also had a chance to compare the size of the UFOs with the size of the balloon. If the UFOs were as close to the balloon as they appeared to be, they would have been 60 feet in diameter. After my visit to General Mills, Incorporated, I couldn't help remembering a magazine article I'd read about a year before. It said that there was not a single reliable UFO report that couldn't be attributed to a skyhook balloon. I'd been back at ATIC only a few days when I found myself packing up to leave again. This time it was for New York. A high-priority wire had come into ATIC describing how a Navy pilot had chased a UFO over Mitchell Air Force Base on Long Island. It was a good report. I remember the trip to New York because my train passed through Elizabeth, New Jersey, early in the morning, and I could see the fires caused by an American Airlines Convair that had crashed. This was the second of the 3 tragic Elizabeth, New Jersey crashes. The morning before, on January 21st, a Navy pilot had taken off from Mitchell in a TBM. He was a lieutenant commander, had flown in World War II, and was now an engineer at the Navy Special Devices Center on Long Island. At 9:50, he had cleared the traffic pattern and was at about 2,500 feet, circling around the airfield. He was southeast of the field when he first noticed an object below him and about 3 runway lengths off the end of runway 30. The object looked like the top of a parachute canopy, he told me. It was white, and he thought he could see the wedges or panels. He said that he thought that it was moving across the ground a little bit too fast to be drifting with wind, but he was sure that somebody had bailed out and that he was looking at the top of his parachute. He was just ready to call the tower when he suddenly realized that this parachute was drifting across the wind. He had just taken off from runway 30 and knew which direction the wind was blowing. As he watched, the object, whatever it was, by now he no longer thought that it was a parachute, began to gradually climb. So he started to climb, he said, staying above and off to the right of the object. When the UFO started to make a left turn, he followed and tried to cut inside. But he overshot and passed over it. It continued to turn and gain speed, so he dropped the nose of the TBM, put on more power, and pulled in behind the object, which was now level with him. In a matter of seconds, the UFO made a 180-degree turn and started to make a big swing around the northern edge of Mitchell Air Force Base. The pilot tried to follow, but the UFO had begun to accelerate rapidly. And since a TBM leaves much to be desired on the speed end, he was getting farther and farther behind. But he did try to follow it as long as he could. As he made a wide turn around the northern edge of the airfield, he saw that the UFO was now turning south. He racked the TBM up into a tight left turn to follow, but in a few seconds the UFO had disappeared. When he last saw it, it had crossed the Long Island coastline near Freeport, and it was heading out to sea. When he finished his account of the chase, I asked the commander some specific questions about the UFO. He said that just after he decided that the UFO was not a parachute, it appeared to be at an altitude of about 200 to 300 feet over a residential section. From the time it took it to cover a city block, he'd estimated that it was traveling about 300 miles an hour. Even when he pulled in behind the object and got a good look, it still looked like a parachute canopy, dome-shaped, white, and it had a dark undersurface. It had been in sight 2.5 minutes. He had called the control tower at Mitchell during the chase, he told me, but only to ask if any balloons had been launched. He thought that he might be seeing a balloon. The tower had told him that there was a balloon in the area. Then the commander took out an aeronautical chart and drew the path of the UFO for me. I think that he drew it accurately because he had been continually watching landmarks as he had chased the UFO and was very careful as he drew the sketches on the map. I checked with the weather detachment at Mitchell and they said that they had released a balloon. They had released it at 9:50 and from a point southeast of the airfield. I got a plot of its path. Just as in the Long Beach incident, where the 6 F-86s tried to intercept the UFO, the balloon was almost exactly in line with the spot where the UFO was first seen, but then any proof you might attempt falls apart. If the pilot knew where he was and had plotted his flight path even semi-accurately, he was never over the balloon. Yet he was over the UFO. He came within less than 2,000 feet of the UFO when he passed over it, yet he couldn't recognize it as a balloon, even though he thought it might be a balloon, since the tower had just told him that there was one in the area. He said that he followed the